Welcome to Sisters in Sobriety. Our guest today is Dr. Bradley Nelson, a holistic physician and best-selling author of The Emotion Code, The Body Code, and his newest book, The Heart Code. Dr. Brad's work focuses on the idea that emotional experiences, especially ones we don't fully process, can become trapped in the body, influencing everything from our physical health to our relationships and even our coping behaviors. Hi, Dr. Brad.
Hi, Sonia. How you doing?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm good.
Thank you so much for being here. So, you grew up in rural Montana and you had some serious health challenges as a child. So, how did those early experiences shape your interest in alternative healing?
If it hadn't been for those early experiences, I probably wouldn't have an interest in alternative healing.
Yeah.
So they were really pivotal. One of the things that happened to me was when I was 7 years old, I was really sick with the measles, and my mother asked my father if he would pray for me that I'd be able to get well. And in the middle of this prayer, suddenly uh, this change begins at the top of my head, and within about the space of 1 second, this energy goes through my body, and I was instantly completely healed. And so, to go from being really sick one moment to being totally well in the next is really amazing. And so that taught me that that healing doesn't have to take a long time. It can happen pretty much instantly because it did happen to me. And it also taught me that there's a higher power that we can draw upon, right? And so then I ended up with kidney disease when I was about 13. And my there was nothing that could be done for me medically. It was quite serious. I mean, I had about a 50-50 chance, I learned later, of surviving it. And my folks ended up taking me to see some holistic doctors. And they started working on me, and right away my body started responding. Now, they weren't giving me any medication. They weren't doing any surgeries or anything like that. They were just realigning my spine primarily and turning the lights back on so my brain could communicate with my kidneys again. And right away I started getting better. And within just a few weeks, I had pretty much forgotten that I'd ever been sick. And my folks took me back to the hospital where all the tests were rerun, and they were told that it was a spontaneous remission. It was remarkable, whatever. And so that also proved to me that uh, there's there are alternative approaches. I learned that at a very young age, and so when I remember deciding when I was 13, this is what I want to do for a living. I want to do what these guys do. And I can remember lying on my back on their treatment table. And by the way, they practiced out on the edge of town in Great Falls, Montana, in a trailer house in the middle of no kidding, in the middle of a wheat field, right? Like in the middle of nowhere. But they would have busloads of people that would come to them from other states. People would charter buses to come out and visit them so everybody could get worked on because they were healers, right? It was amazing. And so I can remember lying on my back as a boy, looking up at them and saying, when I grow up, I want to do what you're doing. And they were very discouraging, Sonia. They would say things like, no, you don't. They would say, if you go to chiropractic school or naturopathic school or some school of natural healing, they'll fill your head so full of fixed ideas about healing that when you get out, you won't even be able to think anymore. You'll be like a zombie, right? And I just thought, wow, that's really interesting. Well, so later, it really was an answer to prayer at a certain point in my life that this is what I needed to do after I had already become a computer programmer, a number of years later. And so I was a programmer for a while and then was brought back to this original dream of mine, right, to go into the healing arts. And so when I went to chiropractic school, I was really radically open, right, to anything that might help. And instructors would say things like, "Oh, this is the best way to take care of this particular problem," or whatever. And I would always think, well, maybe it is, maybe it's not, maybe there's another way, right? So I was always just really radically open, and I took a certain amount of flack for that, from my classmates. But it was interesting. And then when I got into practice, um, I added in another component, and that component really was the prayer component, right? every time I would see a patient, I would just take a moment and just silently ask for help from up above for that patient. And there were times when I practiced for about 18 and a half years, I guess. And during those years, there were just a few times where, in response to that ask, where information would just flood in, right? And I would just be filled with understanding about what to do and how to work on this person. It was amazing. Those were rare. Okay. The rest of the time, information would just come by little drips and drabs here and there. And I was trying to learn everything that I could about healing. I mean, I was obsessed really with getting to the underlying causes of my patients' problems, right? And so, if you think about addictions, what I have found is that addictions really have very little to do with substances. It's really all about emotional pain, really, that people are just trying to deal with, in my opinion, and in my experience, unprocessed emotional pain in the body. And that's what we call trapped emotions, right? So this is what I learned as a computer programmer, and now suddenly as a doctor. What I began to understand, what began to dawn on me, was that every single patient had essentially a computer within them. And it was unlike any computer that I had ever experienced. There was no keyboard, right? There was no screen. What I found was the body communicates to us through symptoms that we experience. Addiction is a symptom, right? It's a symptom of other things. Cancer is a symptom of other things. Migraine headaches are a symptom of other things. Pain, physical pain, emotional pain is a symptom of other things. And so all the symptoms that we experience are really the subconscious mind, the computer within, that's trying to communicate to us that there are other things going on, other imbalances in the body. And so anyway, it was a very interesting process being in practice, because really, it's called practice for a reason, right? Because you're practicing, right? And you start out and you're pretty green, and you have the basics, but then you get better as time goes on, right? You see more patients, you practice more and more. Literally, you're practicing. And that's how it was for me. I had a steady flow of people coming in, day out. And as time went on, their problems got generally more and more complex as my ability to deal with them increased. And what I found was that basically every single person has a subconscious mind, and we have a conscious mind. And the conscious mind is where we spend all of our waking hours, right? And where we have conversations like this, and we live our lives. When we go to sleep, the conscious mind shuts off, and what's left is the subconscious that never shuts down. It's always running, and that's the part of us that's digesting your lunch and keeping your heart beating, and supervising trillions of chemical reactions going on probably every second in your body. And I believe that is a form of intelligence that is beyond our ability to comprehend, the subconscious mind, because it is divine in nature, see? And what I found is that, and what I believe is that the subconscious mind remembers everything. Everything you've ever done, every face you've ever seen in a crowd, everything you've ever eaten or tasted or touched or smelled, every argument you ever had, every emotional experience you ever had, every happy moment, every dark moment, all the tears you've shed. The subconscious mind remembers all of those. And so what's great about it is that we can ask questions of the subconscious mind, and it will give us answers. It's a computer, but it's not like any computer that we're used to. So, for example, if I look at my phone here, this is a computer, isn't it? Right? It's like a little computer, really powerful. And it has a touch screen, so we can touch things, and that's how we interact with it, right? And we see messages on the screen, and that's how we know what's going on. Well, the body has no screen, and it's got no touchpad, it's got no keyboard. So we can communicate with the subconscious mind using different forms of biofeedback, different forms of muscle testing, for example. If I were there with you, Sonia, if you were to hold one arm out parallel to the floor, if you were to say something true like, "My name is Sonia," if I were to press down on your outstretched arm, your arm would stay strong, because that would be a true statement. if you were to say something that's untrue, like if you were to say, my name is Bob, for example, if you were to try to resist my downward pressure, your arm would actually go down because the subconscious mind is connected to the physical body. And when you say something that's incongruent or untrue or negative, your body will weaken just a little bit for about 3 to 5 seconds. And in that little window, we can pick up that change. And therefore, we can actually get yes or no answers out of the subconscious mind. So imagine what it would be like if Google would only give you a yes or no. Imagine if Google had a green light or a red light, and you could ask any question you wanted to, and it would give you a green light or a red light. Yes, green for yes, red for no.
Mm.
Could you get answers? Well, you could, but it would be a little different process, wouldn't it? You'd have to start from the general and move to the more, more defined. But that's how a binary system works. And the subconscious mind is a binary system, at least in terms of its interface, and so we can get answers. And the beautiful thing about that is that the subconscious mind is very willing to give answers. And what I found in practice was when I began to learn how to communicate with this internal computer in my patients, I found that it actually had all the answers about what was really wrong with them. And the number one thing that I found was that people had emotional baggage. And emotional baggage is something, that we've probably almost all used at some point in describing somebody else, right? Like, well, she's got a lot of emotional baggage, that's what's going on with her. Or, yeah, that guy, he's really got a lot of emotional baggage. You probably should stay away from him, things like that. Not realizing that emotional baggage is actually a real thing. And it consists of the energy of the emotions that we experience that don't get processed. And so if you think about our bodies, they're really just energy, right? If you zoom in on your hand with a big enough microscope and eventually you're looking at an atom that makes up a molecule, you see there's really nothing in there. You look inside that atom, it's just empty space. And so everything is energy. In fact, Tesla said, if you want to understand the secrets of the universe, think in terms of energy, frequency, and vibration, right? Right. And Einstein said, the medicine of the future will be the medicine of frequencies. And I think when he said that, probably nobody had any idea what he was talking about. But what we have found is that when you experience an emotion, and we all experience emotions, well, one emotion or the other all the time, most of the time what happens is you feel that emotion. It comes up always in response to some kind of stimulus, right? And most of the time what happens is you feel that emotion and then you kind of acknowledge it and then you just kind of naturally let it dissipate its energy and go away, right? And that's how emotions are designed to be felt. But sometimes what happens is we don't want to go there, right? An emotion is coming up for you. Maybe it's anger, and you learned as a kid anger is bad. You don't want to go there, and so you bury it and you move on. That will result in an incomplete emotional experience. So now that emotional energy is in your body. It's stuck there trying to be expressed. Now it's going to express in some other way through physical pain or some other mental, emotional, physical dysfunction. So that's one way. Another way that we develop emotional baggage is sometimes things happen that are just overwhelming. For example, my sister-in-law yesterday, they had a house fire, and they actually lost a member of their family. Well, something like that happens. The emotions from that are just overwhelming, and that will also result in emotional energies being trapped. Okay, but the other thing that happens, the other way that we create emotional baggage is an emotion comes up for us, somebody says something to us or something happens, and a certain emotion comes up, and we decide consciously that we're going to enhance that emotion. And so instead of just feeling a certain amount of resentment, maybe we decide we're going to really feel resentful or really angry or whatever it is, and we fly off the handle. And usually in those circumstances later, we feel bad because, we tell ourselves, gee, I should really get a better control of my emotions, right? But we've all done these things. And so that's how emotional energies get stuck in the body. And a trapped emotion is what we call this emotional baggage. And a trapped emotion is a little ball of energy about the size of a baseball, about the size of a cantaloupe, we believe. And these can lodge anywhere in the body, and wherever they lodge, they'll create a distorting force on the energy field of the body. And because that's all the body really is an energy field, ultimately, when you have an emotional energy trapped in a certain area, it will interfere with the chemical reactions in that area. We believe it will interfere with the blood flow and the lymph flow to some degree. And it will interfere with the flow of acupuncture meridian energy through that area and all those things. And so when we release emotions, it's not at all unusual for people to feel an immediate relief of their pain. But there are also, it's amazing how powerful these emotions are and how much they affect us, because they are one of the things that drive, for example, addictive behaviors and depression and anxiety and phobias and panic attacks and PTSD and eating disorders and self-sabotage of all kinds. And by getting rid of those emotions, it helps people to be able to get rid of all those symptoms. And oftentimes it's the best thing you can do to help you deal with addictions. Think about it this way, right? If you think about your being as a glass, right? Imagine that it's full of water, and the water is actually representing the emotional energy that you have. As you experience emotional events that are traumatic or difficult, you trap some of those emotions. And so the glass begins to fill, right? And so, we can deal with that, most of us. But then if it gets to a point where that glass is really full and it begins to overflow, just with the emotional experiences that are going on now in the present, you might look for a way to deal with that, because now your emotional pain glass is full, right? And so, using some kind of a substance or being addicted really to almost anything that gives you some kind of pleasure helps you to deal with it, but it's not really, of course, a good solution. A better solution is to actually begin to get a lot of that emotional energy out of the glass. And that's what the emotion code does. It helps you to start removing that baggage that you have, so that now you've got some space between, the top of the water level and the top of the glass. So it's not overflowing for you all the time. You've got some room. So that's kind of in a nutshell what this is
Yeah.
about.
And so when patients would come to you with a certain series of symptoms or complaints, how would you start to diagnose then, or did your methods change of how you were diagnosing, was this an actual physical issue that needed to be corrected? Was it an emotional baggage issue? So how did you start to diagnose what was really going on with your patients?
Great question. Well, I came to rely completely on the subconscious mind of my patients, because I knew, um, as time went on, it became really clear to me that that subconscious mind within each patient knew exactly what they needed. And so, during the last 10 years of my practice, most of the people that I saw had been told there was really no hope for them at all in Western medicine. They would never get well.
Mm.
And yet, the vast majority of those people that came to see me did get well. Why? Well, because I was asking different questions. I was asking their subconscious mind, what's really going on with you? What do we need to do? What's really happening? And so it wasn't just emotional baggage. And by the way, there's a special kind of emotional baggage that is a very powerful force in addiction, and we call that the heart wall. And that's where at some point you feel like your heart is going to break, and the subconscious mind will start to build a wall around your heart. And that wall is made of layers of emotional energy that form a protective barrier for the heart to keep your heart from breaking. But that also it's also a big factor in addiction. And so getting rid of that wall around the heart is very important. And so I learned to just, ask the body. In fact, I remember I had a patient one day that came in to see me. Woman, she was in her 40s, really suffering with fibromyalgia and chronic fatigue syndrome. She's just exhausted all the time and pain all over her body. And I don't know, I was in a weird mood that day, and I had done the initial intake on her and everything, and her exam and everything, and I looked at her and I said, "Well," I said, "I'm basically clueless about what's wrong with you," you know? And her eyes got really big, and I said, "But wait," I said, "It's okay. Your internal computer, your subconscious mind knows exactly what's going on with you, and I know how to talk to it, so it's okay."
Mm.
She did get well, you know? So,
And so what is the heart wall? Because I think that concept will really resonate with our audience.
yeah, well, oh, it's so interesting. Uh, let's go back to ancient times. The ancient peoples believed that the heart was the seat of the soul and the source of love and creativity and romance. And they believed that the heart was really the core of our being. Now, in the West, we've never really given any credence to those ancient ideas. I mean, at most, it seems, if you're lucky on Valentine's Day, somebody gives you a heart-shaped box of chocolates. And that's because those ideas about the heart go back thousands of years, right? To the ancients' beliefs about the heart being the seat of romance and so on. And so they believed those things because of the things that they observed, the same things that we have all observed. For example, if you feel like someone is really hurting you, or you're really deep in grief, you will feel a pressure here, right? You'll feel like your heart is maybe going to break. You might feel like you're choking, like you can't breathe. By the same token, um, if you say you're at a concert and there's someone singing, and they're singing to beyond their natural ability almost, to a point that their heart is just vibrating, right? Your heart is vibrating with theirs. And pretty soon you'll find that your hands naturally go over your heart, and you'll get a tear in your eye, maybe too. And you look around, and a lot of people will have their hands like this,
Mm.
and tears in their eyes, right? Because we resonate with when someone is really performing or doing something truly from their heart, and their heart is really resonating. We resonate with that. And the ancients understood that too. So they understood and they believed all these things about the heart. And in the West, we've ignored those things. But I remember as a kid back in the 1960s when they first started doing heart transplants. And it was a big deal. And I was always kind of, interested in that kind of thing. And I remember, um, but it didn't take long before doctors started noticing a strange phenomenon. And they found that sometimes some patients would, after their transplant, would come back to the doctor and they would report strange goings on. For example, their taste in food or music or sports would have completely changed 180 degrees since their heart transplant. Sometimes they would have memories of being in places that they never in their life had ever visited. And in every case that I've ever read, when these people were connected with the family of the heart donors, and there are books written about this, they would inevitably find out things like, well, yes, our son was a baseball player, and now you love baseball, and his heart's beating in you, and isn't that weird?
Mm.
Never cared for it before. Or, well, yeah, our daughter visited Rome every year, was her favorite city in the world. Now you have memories of being in Rome, but you've never been there. So those are her memories. How weird is that, right? And it's called cellular memory, right? Well, we have instrumentation now that shows that when one person's feeling love or affection for another person, their heartbeat can appear in the brain waves of that other person, and their heart rates will synchronize. And they don't have to be touching. It doesn't seem to matter. It's very interesting. And so all of this is telling us that the heart is much more than just a pump, which is what you'll read in Western
Mm.
medical biology books. The heart's just a pump. That's all it is. But no, it's much, much more than that. It's a single muscle, the heart, actually. And if you unwind the heart, it's actually a spiral. It's very interesting. Um, so what the heart wall is because of what the heart truly is. The ancients, everything they thought about it, I believe, is absolutely true. And so when you feel like your heart's going to break, the subconscious mind will actually begin to build a wall around that heart. And that wall is literally made from layers of your emotional baggage. One of the first people that I saw that had this going on was a woman that came in to see me because she had neck pain that was pretty bad. It was about a 9 on a 0 to 10 scale. She'd had it for a couple of months, as I recall. She came in, she'd seen a couple of other doctors for it. And as I was talking with her, she told me that she was a nurse. She was 38 years old. She had not dated in 8 years, and she was never going to date again. She was going to die single. And I said, well, gee, how did you arrive at that? And she said that 8 years before, she was really deeply in love with this guy that dumped her and broke her heart, right? And so that was it. She was never going to date again. So I worked on her, found she had a heart wall. There were 3 emotions making up these layers around her heart. Okay. And they all had to do with the breakup from 8 years before. Cleared those 3 layers, and all of a sudden, when the last one was gone, guess what else left? Her neck pain suddenly dropped to 0, I mean, instantly, right? And she was so excited because that's what she'd come in for, right? So I didn't see her again for 3 months. When she came back the next time, I saw her in my hallway and I said, hey, how are you? What's going on? She said, my neck's been fine since I was here. But she said, you worked on that heart wall. You released that heart wall for me. And that really works because she said about 2 weeks after I was here, I found out my childhood sweetheart's been living right around the corner from me for almost 8 years. And we're dating and we're in love. And I think he's going to ask me to marry him. Right. And I thought, wow, this stuff really does work. And so we have thousands of testimonials about this from all over the world. And of course, that's what this new book is about, the heart code. And I have a special link I'll tell you about later where people can go and get special bonus with this. But anyway, yeah. And in the beginning, I thought that this was a rare thing, but now I realize it's not rare at all. Better than 9 out of 10 people have put up a wall like this because they've gone through something difficult. Can you remember, Sonia, in your own life, feeling like your heart was going to break?
Oh, yeah, for sure. Yeah, that's why I was wondering and to kind of break down my heart wall, I guess I went to therapy, right? And I talked to friends and family, and I kind of like rebuilt my life. What is your method? What is this method of like getting those emotions, those 3 layers? How did you remove those 3 layers?
Well, the emotion code is really simple. How it works is, first of all, you have to have some way to communicate with the subconscious mind, which sounds really esoteric and really out there, but it's actually really, really simple. Simple enough that kids can do it. And there are a number of different methods. So the one of the methods that I described to you earlier, where you'd have your arms stretched out, right? Your body will give you strong for yes, weak for no. That's one way. Another way that you can do it is through various different forms of muscle testing that we use. So for example, this is called the ring in ring method of testing. And if I ask a question and the answer is yes, the rings will stay together. If the answer is no, the rings will break apart. Okay, that's another method. Another method is something that we call the sway test. And if you'd like, I can maybe just share everybody in a couple of minutes how that one works. That one's probably the simplest one of all. Okay, so here's how this works. If you think about it, think about a plant. If you put a plant in a pot and put it near the window, if you don't rotate it periodically, it's going to be permanently bent, towards the light coming in from the window. Light is a positive input for the plant, and it will kind of lean that way. Well, the human body will also lean. If you're holding thoughts of positivity or congruency or truth, and you're standing upright, very relaxed, you'll find that your body will tend to sway forward. Now, if you're holding thoughts of negativity or falsehood or incongruency, you'll find within about 3 to 10 seconds, your body will tend to sway backward, right? And so this is what we call the sway test. And it's one of the simplest ways from the subconscious mind. So for your listeners and viewers, this works best standing, okay? Now, if you can't stand, you can wait until you can stand, or if you want to, you can try sitting on the very edge of your chair, but standing does seem to work better.
Do it. Yeah.
All right, cool.
I'll do the edge of the chair. Okay.
The edge of the chair. All right. So here we go. So what you do is you just close your eyes, drop your hands down to your sides, okay? Take a deep breath. let it out. And we'll start with something really negative, okay? About the most negative thing that goes on the planet is war. I think it may be unique to this planet in many ways. But what I'd like you to do for a moment is I'd like you to just, as you're sitting there on the edge of your chair, or as you're standing very relaxed, arms down to your sides, with your feet about shoulder width apart, just relax, 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 and then try to imagine what it would be like to explain to someone um, who maybe has been living in a cave their whole life. Try to explain to them what war is. We kind of take it for granted. It's been going on all of our lives. There's war going on somewhere in the world all the time, right? There's a war going on now. But I'd like you to imagine what's really happening when a war is being fought. What are people wearing one uniform actually doing to people wearing another uniform? And it's essentially legalized murder, right? Think about all the villages destroyed, all the lives ruined. Think about all the tears that have been shed since day one on this crazy planet, over all the wars that have been fought, all the sadness, all the heartbreak, just such an awful, awful thing. Now, as you're thinking about that, and as you keep thinking about that, what that would be like to explain war, I mean, imagine what really goes on a human level, on a personal level, what people do to each other, and they murder each other. Uh, as you think about that, when your subconscious mind begins to connect with what you're consciously thinking, in that moment, you'll begin to sway backward. Your body will begin to sway. Now, this usually takes between 3 to 10 seconds for your subconscious mind to connect with what you're consciously thinking about. The more you do this, the faster it gets. But most of your listeners, most of your viewers are leaning back at this point. So open your eyes for a second. And now, let me ask you, could you feel your body going backward on that one?
Yeah, I'm backwards right now a couple of inches.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, let's do this. Let's leave the thoughts of war behind now.
Okay.
Let's go to something really, really positive. Okay. Let's imagine. So again, close your eyes. If you're standing, just drop your hands to your sides, take a deep breath, let it out. There we go. All right. Now let's try it again, but let's try something really positive. Let's imagine that 1,000 years have gone by of Earth's time, and you are still alive somehow. And but you're not the same person that you used to be at all. You have grown in many, many profound ways, and you now are in this place where you're surrounded with unconditional love all the time. All the beings on Earth have nothing but unconditional love for one another, and your ability to love has grown exponentially to the point that the love that fills your heart for all beings, for all of creation, is so huge that your heart cannot contain that love. And that love expands out from your heart, and it goes out and it fills the whole world, every nook and cranny, your love for all beings. And it goes out beyond this world and fills the immensity of space. I want you to imagine just for a moment, try to connect with what that would actually feel like to be a vessel of perfect, unconditional love, to be that ascended being that you've heard about, that you have the capability to become. Think about that for a moment. What would that feel like? And at this point, most of your listeners or viewers are right on the edge of their tiptoes, right? Or on the edge of their chairs, because the subconscious mind will want to move you towards that, because that is absolutely a potential future for you, because we are all immortal beings, and we can all get there, with time. It may take an eon or two, but we can get there. So,
Wow.
yeah, isn't that fun? Now we can use this capacity of the subconscious mind to sway forward toward things, it likes, or that are positive or congruent or true, or backwards, away from things that are incongruent or negative or untrue. So one of the things that you can do, you can use this method, okay, and you can ask questions of the subconscious mind. Like, for example, do I have a trapped emotion? that needs to be released. If I relax and I hold that thought in my mind, I'm going to get either a forward sway for yes or a backward sway for no. So
Mm.
the next step that we do is we have this chart of emotions, looks like that. Okay. There are 60
Yeah.
emotions on the chart, divided up into 2 columns and 6 rows. And what's interesting is that your subconscious mind, let's say that you're doing this and you get a yes answer, your body goes forward, and that's your subconscious saying, yeah, I have a trapped emotion, it needs to be released. The next question would be, okay, is the emotion in column A or column B? Because your subconscious mind knows exactly what the emotion is. So let's say that you go forward on column A. Great. You've narrowed the list by half. You have 30 left out of 60. Then what you would do is you'd ask, okay, is this emotion in column A in one of the odd rows, 1 or 3 or 5? Okay. Is it in one of the odd rows? And maybe you go backward on that one. So then you know, all right, it's got to be in column A, row 2, 4, 6, right? So you have 15 left out of 60. Then you'd ask, all right, well, is it in row 2 in column A? Maybe you go backward on that one. So that's a no. Is it in row 4? Maybe you go forward. So that's a yes. So now you've narrowed it down just within really just a few seconds, maybe 20, 30 seconds. You've narrowed it down to 5 emotions. Okay. So let's say that you have narrowed it down to column A, row 4. Well, there are 4 emotions in that one. Anger,
Mm.
bitter, guilt, hatred, and resentment. Okay. All fun emotions. They're all so now what do? Well, you just simply keep asking. All right, well, is the emotion anger? Maybe you go backward on that one. Is the emotion bitterness? Well, maybe you go forward. Okay, so it's bitterness. So then the next question would be, you've identified the emotion. So the next question would be, okay, do we need to know more about this? Because you see, you can think of an emotional experience as being kind of like a loop, right? You begin
Mm.
to feel that emotion, you kind of acknowledge it, it dissipates its energy, and the emotional experience is over. And now you're ready for the next experience. But when an emotion gets trapped in the body, the emotional experience did not complete. So now you have an open loop essentially for that experience.
Mm.
And so that's what really the emotion code is about, finding these open loops, right? Where that energy is still there in the body and creating symptoms for you. So we ask this next question. Let's say that you found that it was bitterness. Okay. Right. The next question would be, do we need to know more about this? And if your body goes backward or you get a no answer, then at that point, you just release the emotion, and you can release the emotion with a magnet or with your hand, because your hand's also magnetic. And you just start on the forehead and you go over to the back of the neck 1, 2, 3 times. Okay. And you can use a magnet or your hand, either way. That's easy. Now, sometimes it is very simple, very fast. Sometimes, though, the subconscious mind will need you to know more to be able to close an open loop. It might need you to know, hey, this was about something that happened. So the next thing we would do is we would ask, okay, if we need to know more, the first question is, when did this happen? Okay. So what you do is you take your age and you divide it in half, right? So let's say you're 40, you'd say, well, did this happen earlier than 20? Maybe that's a no. Okay. Did it happen between 20 and 30? Oh, maybe that's a yes. So then you could narrow it down in that same way to the year. And then a memory might come back to you and you might realize, oh, yeah, that's right. Bitterness. I remember I got fired from that job and I was accused of all these things. And it was so awful. I'm sure that's got to be what it's about. Then you could even ask, is that what this is about? And you'll get a forward sway if that's what it's about. And sometimes people don't remember things. Sometimes things happen in childhood. Sometimes things
Mm.
happen in the womb. And sometimes we inherit emotional energy from an ancestor.
Mm.
Sometimes, sometimes it can be many generations back that's been traveling down your line like a freight train, and you might have trouble today with money because maybe your eighth great grandfather was thrown into the poorhouse, right? And had all kinds of
Mm.
about that. Or maybe you have a hard time with relationships because maybe your great 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 grandmother was jilted at the altar or something like that. That
Mm.
energy passes down to us in the present. And you can find those too using the emotion codes really easy. But that's essentially the process. So once you get a no answer to the question, do we need to know more? Then you can just release the emotion just by swiping a few times like so. If it's an inherited emotion, We do 10 swipes because we're clearing it not only from us, but also it also clears from those ancestors that are holding that energy, or siblings or children or grandchildren or whatever. And so that's basically the process. And it's really fast. Once people get the hang of this, they can usually clear a trapped emotion, release one in usually less than a minute. And
Wow.
yeah, so that's one of the reasons why it's so popular, is because it's so fast. But it's basically stripped down to the absolute minimum that you need to know to get rid of the emotional energy. There are other methods. And I know you're aware, there are methods out there that say, well, to heal the pain, you have to feel the pain, right? You got to go back in, you got
Hmm.
to experience the rape or whatever
Hmm.
it is. And it's like, oh my gosh, no, you don't need to do that. With the emotion code, all you do is identify the emotional energy that's trapped wherever it is, and release it, and it's gone. And if you do it this way, we've never ever seen a trapped emotion come back. They're gone permanently. See, so it's a method of energy removal.
And how
Einstein
are
would,
the heart yeah, how are the heart wall and emotion code? How can they be connected to addiction?
well, think about it this way. Think about all these emotions on this chart, right? And then imagine for a moment that the average person probably has about 300 emotions trapped in their body, emotional energies that they are unaware of. But think about these emotions, right? And imagine if some part of you is feeling these emotions on some level, because that's the reality. So, I mean, abandonment, betrayal, feeling forlorn, feeling hopeless, feeling a lack of control or low self esteem or grief or self abuse or rejection,
Hmm.
sadness, sorrow, bitterness, hatred, panic, guilt, shame, the lowest vibration of all the emotions, right? And so, what happens to us is that as we as we go through our lives, it's like we're dragging steamer trunks of emotional baggage behind us, right? And that's why life is so difficult, and we wonder, why can't I succeed better? Why can't I find love? Why is my life so difficult? Why am I an addict? What's driving that? Let me tell you a story.
Hmm.
There was a guy that came to one of our events that was he was very overweight, and he lost 180 pounds in 1 year, right? He weighed about 400 pounds, lost 180 pounds in 1 year. And I was talking to him, and he told me how he did it. He said that he had tried all kinds of things. He tried all kinds of diets, and nothing ever really worked. He might lose a little and then it would come right back, the typical story. But when he learned about the emotion code, he said he started to use it. And what he would do is, when he would feel an urge to eat a pan of brownies, or, to eat the whole pizza or whatever it was, he would stop himself and he would check to see, with his subconscious mind, he would ask, okay, do I have a trapped emotion that is driving this behavior? And he'd find one, or maybe two, and he'd release those. And then that urge would pass. That's the only thing he changed in that year. Is he just began to remove the emotional baggage that was driving his addictive behavior, his food addiction, basically, and made all the difference in the world. He looked great when I met him.
So
As a
that would work for alcohol cravings, you think, as well?
Totally, absolutely, it works. Yeah,
Wow.
I mean, human beings are complex, right? But this is definitely an aspect of our behavior that is very powerful. I mean, yeah, we've seen people. In fact, I was just reading a story the other day about a woman who had been an addict for a long time, addicted to alcohol, right? An alcoholic, and she had tried lots of different things to overcome that, and had never been able to. But she got work done by a practitioner who cleared her heart wall. Now, remember, the heart wall is also just made of these same emotions, right? It just happens that they happen to be wrapped around the heart, and so that can be even more. It can be an even more uh, negative effect as far as addictions go, because it's wrapped around the heart itself, and the heart is it's where you live, right? Anyway, she got these emotions released, and she said that normally she couldn't go more than a couple of days without drinking. And a couple of days came and went, and she didn't have an urge to drink. And a couple of more days came and went. She still had no urge to drink. And at the time, she sent in a testimonial. I believe it's in the Heart Code book. It's just one testimonial, but it really illustrates how these emotional energies can be released. Listen to this. This woman's name is Velvet from New Hampshire. She said, I was eager to release my heart wall as soon as I watched that part of the seminar. It was made up of water that was 5 miles deep. Now, when the subconscious mind creates a wall around the heart, it will always choose some kind of a symbolic material for the heart wall to be, quote unquote, made out of. And in the Heart Code book, and in the other books too, especially in the Heart Code book, we teach people how to identify what it's made out of. It's just kind of an interesting thing. Anyway, she said afterward, I released 4 trapped emotions and it was gone. Afterward, I expected to feel a huge weight lift off my shoulders, but I felt nothing. Everything seemed normal. I thought, okay, well, I'm new at this and I can try again. This was on January 3rd of 2013. I'm an alcoholic. I've struggled with alcoholism for 20 years. I've tried to stop many times, but no matter how hard I tried, nothing worked. The last drink I had had before releasing my heart wall was 2 days earlier on New Year's Eve. Usually I could go about 3 days without drinking, 3 days, before I couldn't resist the overwhelming urge. But after releasing my heart wall, something changed. On January 6th, I realized, wow, I haven't had a drink. I haven't even felt the urge. I asked myself, do I feel an urge now? The answer was no. In fact, it was the exact opposite. I had no desire to drink. I knew at that moment it was because I had released my heart wall. I thought, okay, let's see what happens next. Days passed with no desire to drink. Then more days. I thought, wow, maybe I can go a whole month without drinking. Now it has been almost 3 months and I still have no desire to drink. I feel amazing. So fortunate and blessed to have come across the emotion code. My life has completely turned around for the better, and I'm so grateful. There are no words to describe the happiness I feel. In just 15 minutes, maybe less, I was able to rid myself of a terrible burden that could have destroyed my life and those around me, and that was just the tip of the iceberg. To me, the emotion code is a new way of life. I'm deeply grateful to Dr. Nelson and everybody who made this possible. I can't wait to get certified and help others. So that's just one story, but isn't that fun? I love that
It's
story.
amazing. So how do you define true healing versus just symptom relief?
Well, think of it this way, right? The symptoms that we experience are the subconscious mind's way of communicating to us that there's something else going on. Now, see, in Western medicine, it's all about suppressing the symptoms, Oh, you got migraine headaches? Well, here, we've got a drug that's so powerful that, you won't feel the migraines, but, you might grow hair on your toes they all have side effects. I
Mhm.
remember my brother-in-law, who was a chiropractor, had a patient that was on some really powerful drug, and it created something called furry tongue. They literally had like
Mm.
fur growing out of their tongue because all these drugs, they all have side effects, and some of them are not good. Most of them are not good. You take them for the one side effect that they cause, but then there's a whole list of other ones. But so that's what symptoms are. So if you think of symptoms in that way, and you realize that symptoms are really not the problem, symptoms are the communication method of the subconscious mind to you. So if you can address the underlying reasons that are known to the subconscious and you correct those imbalances that are in the body, then the symptoms will no longer need to be expressed by the subconscious mind. So then they go away. So, that's how the game is played, honestly. And that's how the game is going to be played in the future, the game of healing. It's really, we can't go back to the days of just looking at the body as a dumb machine. The body is divine in origin, and it's intelligent beyond our ability to comprehend. And we're made of pure energy. And so there's so much more going on with these bodies of ours. It's unbelievable. I mean, for example, they just discovered that light itself, which we've been studying for, probably hundreds of years, really, they just discovered Light has 17 different, it has 48 different dimensions, and it has a topography within it. So it has like a whole alphabet within light itself, 17,000 different topographies within light, something we never even knew. But I mean, we're living in an age when everything is being revealed and everything is being discovered. So, to me, symptoms are they're just interesting. They're just a communication, and they're the last thing that shows up and usually the first thing that goes away when you start addressing the underlying causes.
Yeah. And for someone listening right now who's feeling stuck, what is one small thing they can do today?
Well, I'll tell you what I would recommend, if you can do it, what I would recommend is that they go to my website at drbradleynelson.com. And if you use the code SISTERS, okay, there are some really special discounts that you can get. Of course, you can buy the Heart Code book. You can buy this anywhere, right? Amazon, Barnes & Noble, etc. But if you go to drbradleynelson.com and you buy some there, then I can't remember exactly how many you need to buy, but you buy a few for your family members and so on, and you actually will get a free session from one of our practitioners. And because this work is energy work, it's done at a distance. And so we've certified over 15,000 people, probably almost 16,000 now in over 100 countries around the world that do this work. And most of them do it at a distance because this is true energy medicine. You don't have to be there. Einstein would have loved this. He would have understood it perfectly, right? Tesla too.
Yeah. That's amazing. That's amazing. We'll definitely link to all those in our show notes. And Dr. Bradley, thank you so much for being here today. I learned so much, and I know our listeners did too.
Thank you, Sonia. It was really fun. Well, if you ever want to do another show, we can talk about animals and how this works for animals too.
Oh my God. Okay. Yeah, let's set it up.
Absolutely.
All right. And thank you all for listening to Sisters in Sobriety, and we will see you next week.